couple of examples of the intelligence of octopus and squid. Now, a major challenge here, they have very different styles of brains and different sorts of influences, things they're trying to do. And so what we think of as stand for human intelligence is not going to be the same for them. Nevertheless, there are some impressive things we can see in them. For example, some octopus have been able to learn the idea of picking what's different out of a set of things. Now, humans, it sounds pretty basic. It's on Sesame Street. One of these things is not like the other. But for an invertebrate to have that kind of abstract concept of different, not just pick the red square, but pick which of these is different from the other, is a quite impressively complex idea. Octopus also have very little hard skeleton. Basically, if they can get their brain through space, they can get all the rest of the body. So they are very skilled between their intelligence and their squishiness at escaping from tanks, hiding, things like that. They also can figure out a number of challenges for getting into containers. One aquarium provide octopus with a bit of something that would float, and the octopus would squirt water at it, as was the current, and then would float back and squirt again, almost kind of like bouncing a ball. Another example from squid. This was a video mollusk meetings at some years back where they were studying Caribbean reef squid, fairly common species to see if you're snorkeling around in the Caribbean somewhere. And one of the videos they had, there were 3 squids. There was a female squid over to one side, and then a male squid, and another male off over here. The guy in the middle, on the side towards the other male, he's got his plain old ho-hum swimming around the reef type colors. On the side towards the female, he's flashing his fanciest display colors. He's trying to impress her without tipping the guy off that there's anything to notice over in the other direction. Quite complex ability, also adjusting their shape, their color pattern. Very impressive animals. As animals develop more complexity, we see bigger nerve systems, more cells, greater areas of concentration, ganglia, having a true brain, bigger nerve cords, more specialization of different parts of the nervous system, and more connections. A more complex nervous system characteristic is concentrated in the head end. And so we see what's referred to as cephalization of the nervous system. Why there? Well, your head is towards the front when you're moving around. So that's going to be getting information about what's coming up. Very important. It's a lot easier to tell where you're going and be prepared if you've got your sense organs in front, instead of if you're trying to go not having your sense organs in front. So if, say, you've got your eyes and ears and nose or whatever senses you might happen to have up towards the front, having them right close to the brain, nerve signal gets to the brain quite quick, and you decide what to do. Development of the nervous system. The invertebrates, we start out with a tube, known as a neural tube, along the back, and this develops the brain and spinal cord along it. Different major regions of the brain. The hindbrain, also known as the cerebellum, and the cerebrum, the forebrain. These handle much of the learned behavior. Those of us that do think use them as well. Midbrain, other regions tend to be involved more in the reflex action, things that happen without our having to think about them. So here we have very early in development, we have a relatively simple structure in the early embryo, and then that develops greater complexity as the embryo grows towards the adult form. Fish, although decent brains as animals go, have much less developed than the land vertebrates. Cerebrum and cerebellum get bigger as we go along towards the birds and mammals, and more complex. And in turn, this enables more complex behaviors being controlled by the brain. Another variation you see is size of different parts. For example, in the alligator here, there's a fairly large area for smell, the olfactory bulb. It's smelling a lot, and so that part's relatively well developed. We don't rely so much on smell as people, and our olfactory region correspondingly tends to be more on the small side. So different parts of the brain, you see size related to the vision there. Birds have a rather large lobe for vision because they need to see all around them and know when they're flying if they're going to run into something. Very important data. So typically very well developed visual region. The central nervous system is very, very important for your well-being, so it's well protected. You have a set of multiple layers around it. Connective tissue providing protection. And inside we have a fluid there, provides some cushioning, and in turn, chemically, it can exchange things in and out with the blood. If there's any problem in it, medical approach can be to poke a big needle in and get a little of that fluid. That is known as a spinal tap. From the brain, we go to the spinal cord, extending down through most of your backbone. There's a very small central canal, and then there's the gray matter around it, looking kind of orange in this picture, but anyway. And then the white matter around it. The gray matter is kind of the cell bodies, things of that sort. The white matter is the myelinated axons, the ones with that extra insulation carrying signals rapidly up and down the spinal cord. Some messages are processed in the spinal cord to get a more rapid response, if it's something rather urgent. For example, putting your finger on something very hot, you jerk it away, and then, ow! The get your finger off of that's too hot, is something that the spinal cord processes and goes ahead and sends a signal rather than waiting for it to get all the way to your brain and back down again. Now, of course, the message also goes to the brain to say, ow, but the jerk that away when there's something immediate danger, the spinal cord actually handles that processing. Up in the brain, cerebrum, major part of more complex thinking and action. There are areas receiving the sensory information, whether it's external or internal, coming in, and then have to decide what to do with it. And then there are regions of the brain that control the different parts of the body for moving in response to that. And of course, then we have put these together. These areas are what will process and make these decisions, also memory, things like that, and then send on and out through the motor areas. And so it's possible to work out and map what parts of the brain are controlling different aspects. Now, it's complicated. There are lots of connections in there, pinning down exactly is often complex, but there are general regions of the brain controlling different things. One complexity is that the neural fibers coming in actually cross over so that the signals from the left side actually come across and go into the right side of the brain, and the ones coming from the right side go into the left side of the brain. This is popular for left-handed people to point out because they can claim that they are in their right minds. Left side also does more with things like language, logic, facts. Right side, more emotion and tasks of those sort. And again, here's a diagram version. The funny looking shapes here represent the proportions of different parts of the body that, on the one hand, touch is being processed along here. We're particularly attentive to touch in our hands, so our hands get a lot more space than, say, our elbows. Touch from the elbow versus touch from the hand. Face, likewise, a lot there. And then directing motion. Our hands or face, there's a lot of very fine control, and so a lot of the brain is used in controlling those, and not so much in, say, our legs.